Sitting here with Tim Riley. This is maybe our third, fourth episode podcast. I'm not sure, but we're talking tendons today. Before we talk tendons, tell everyone who you are.
Yeah, my name's Tim Riley. I'm a performance coach in Austin, Texas. I work with high school, collegiate, and pro athletes from volleyball to lacrosse to NFL players to volleyball. I kind of got my hand in a little bit of everything. I guess if I specialize in anything at this point, it's probably NFL offseason training. Probably, if anyone knows who I am, it's probably from that. Um, yeah, I've got a podcast called Coach 'em Up Podcast. We need to have the admin back on to boost the numbers for sure. Yeah, we've got a conference coming up in June, June 13th and 14th, and Jake is going to be presenting on tendons. And the conference is already sold out. So no fucking pressure, Jake.
Well, they said I need to have that presentation a week before. I haven't started, so I think I can get it a week before. But yeah, I mean, it helps.
Listen,
I've already spoke at Boyles. It was like an hour presentation, so I have like a good
and that
layout
was a
of what to
shit
do.
ton of people. How many people were there? A couple
I
hundred?
Yeah, maybe two
Had to
fifty
have
or something.
been.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of things just went on people's heads, which I have a hard time doing. But yeah. Anyways, we I think we first met through Instagram through Patellar Tendon, right?
For sure. Yep.
You had the jumper's knee.
I did
Um,
have jumper's knee.
yeah, so I think we've talked about it before, but you've kind of went through the process. You released your jumper's knee program, and then
I did.
you kind of does that still exist?
It does still exist. I kind of jokingly talk about it. It comes up on the podcast sometime. Like when you look at it, it's just a fucking Word document. Like it looks like dog shit. The program is actually decent, but people still buy it. Like at least one or two people a month still purchase it. And people seem to like it. So
Yeah.
the good news is like it's exactly what I did to help me and athletes I was training at the time get better and improve their jumper's knee pain.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's like a basically it's like a conglomeration of like stuff I learned from David, principles I took from you, and then like the direct squat training and quad strengthening protocol that I basically came up with for myself. So it's really standing on the shoulders of you two, frankly, the
So
tendon gods.
if you go back to, I guess when you had it before that, and then you kind of rehabbed it yourself, what were you thinking? Like when you had the initial bout of jumper's knee, what did you think it was? What did you think you had to do?
So when I first started experiencing jumper's knee, I didn't know what the fuck was going on. I was like, why do my knees hurt? You know what I mean? And I would be like rubbing my tendons all the time, and I'd notice like whenever I play basketball, they would really hurt. And then you know, uh, I started like researching like what's going on. It's like jumper's knee, and I'm like, oh okay. And at the time, all the information out, like the way you dealt with jumper's knee pain, like the consensus was, uh, don't let your knees go past your toes because that's going to irritate it. Rest, ice them, no direct quad training, right? So like you definitely wouldn't want to get on a leg extension or like, get into a super knee dominant hack squat and blast your quads. Like that was definitely off the table. The playbook was this: rest, ice, isometrics, but like body weight only. You know what I mean? Isometrics. And then foam rolling and stretching and like soft tissue work. And then like pray, cross your fingers, hope it goes away kind of thing. And so that's what I did, dude. I did that, for like a long time, just kind of, and it would like, as you know from your own tendon pain journey, it's like it gets better and then it gets worse. And then you do something, it gets worse. And you're like, wait, why did that hurt? I don't understand. Let me stretch and foam roll more. And then like you get an analgesic effect from just like kind of doing like stuff, passive stuff. And then you go right back to doing the thing and then it's fucking hurt again and it's way worse than it's ever been. So you stop doing everything for a while. Then you come back, you're like, oh, I'm good. But you're wrong. You're not good because you're weaker. And it just, and then like the more pain, my experience was the worse it got, the more I avoided loading my quads and bending my knees. The more I avoided loading my quads and bending my knees, the worse it got, you know? And so at the time, I'm like, I'm doing all the things everybody says you're supposed to do to improve jumper's knee. Why? None of it's fucking working. And Um, and of course, running parallel to this at the time in sports performance, the um, the consensus from a training perspective also was you don't do leg extensions because it's bad for your ACLs and you don't want to be quad dominant. And if you do leg extensions or if you do correct quad training, you're going to get quad dominant and you're going to shred your ACLs. Oh, and by the way, if you do anything that's like directly training just a muscle group, you're a bodybuilder, and bodybuilders are slow and unathletic. So you can't do any bodybuilding rep ranges, or else you're a bodybuilder and you're just a fucking slow meathead, you know. So like there was all at that time there were all these there was a lot of misinformation. There was a lot of nonsense standing in the way for someone like myself who had jumper's knee. And of course now, fast forward, thanks to people like you, Jake, people like David, the the pendulum has swung, and like a lot of those things that we used to think are, you're a dipshit if you're doing leg extensions and you're training like an athlete. Now it's like people are using machines all the time, and the idea of not loading a tissue for tendon pain is laughable, at least for trainers and coaches who are in the know. And thank God for that. But it only took us what, you know, 7, 8 years to get there. So, but yeah, and then that's how I met David. That's how I met you. Was just I was running out of answers, and Just Fly Sports Performance podcast is where I heard David. You and I connected from just like me posting and me following you and us interacting and stuff. I think we really connected when I asked you to come on, coach me up the original iteration of my podcast. You came out, you were kind enough to, we did a hypertrophy cluster
Yeah.
session together. And we sat out on that windy ass porch at my Lifetime gym. Um, but yeah, so that was my, I don't want to ramble too long, but that was my initial, the first few years of dealing with jumper's knee pain. And it would get to the point where I couldn't even walk up and down stairs without fucking limping. It was bad.
Yeah. I tweaked my pec during that coach me up. Remember that?
Yes,
On the bench
dude,
press, and then
yes.
I was like, we're not gonna put that in the video. So I did dumbbell bench. I don't know why that happened. I don't know. A lot
Yeah.
of driving maybe. Dude, it is crazy that back when I had it too, I was searching like I mean, and the things I knew were like T Nation, Elite FTS, this because I didn't like the vibe of the physical therapy or the medical route of their advice on the jumper's knee because it's like resting and icing
Hmm.
and then physical therapy room you're doing like just baby exercises and it's like I want to lift heavy, I want to do something like a meathead. And so like I went to the strength coach route, but it was a lot of it was posterior chain stuff. There was nothing.
Yep.
It was just
Your
posterior chain.
hamstrings must be weak.
Yeah,
Your
and then
hamstrings are weak.
getting your hips, like getting your glutes. It's like you jump to quad dominant, so activate your glutes. And I would spend months on programs doing like bird dogs. I would literally do like bird dog holds for like 3 minutes, 5 minutes. I had this knee pain program. I need to find it. It was all hip stuff, like hip hinge, just rewiring your body to be more hip dominant than knee dominant, and just avoiding quads like at all costs, stretching them.
Mhm.
And it just made them so weak. And it's crazy now that when people come to me with the jumper's knee, it's like the first thing, generally the first thing. The first thing is usually I want to figure out what the knee pain is, so like patellofemoral or some other issue. But if it's kind of confirmed it's patellar tendon, it's like the first thing is, well, what are your numbers on quads? What are your numbers on the leg extension? What are your numbers on quad strength? And that is like the number one thing. I'm curious for you on this because I think David said it recently on he had a knee pain consult podcast. And he was talking to the guy about spending more time developing quad strength because he was saying a lot of people just kind of rush through it and they don't get to that point and then they go into like intense jumping or intense sport activities. And it was the same. I did a podcast with Chris Johnson where he had tore his patellar tendon, not complete, avulsed it, something like this, really bad injury. And he said it took him years to get his quad strength back of consistent loading. So when you have guys like NFL, because you've said you have a lot of guys with jumpers knee,
You do.
if they present with like weaker quads, how or is it too variable? How long does it take for you to get quad strength back?
Well, so I talked about this on the podcast with David recently. So people, most people do not know that football players have jumper's knee. virtually every position. You know what I mean? Save for like maybe guards or something, but like jumper's knee is not jumper's knee, it's decelerator's knee. Like I think we can kind of all agree at this point that it's not the concentric portion of a movement that flares up the tendon. It's the rapid deceleration or the rapid loading of that tendon and either like suddenly trying to stop or change direction, which are both kind of the same thing actually when you think about it. So, um, guess what you're doing in football? You're stopping, starting, and changing direction, particularly if you're in like a skill position, linebackers, running backs, corners, safeties, receivers. The D line less likely, but even defensive ends. Like I've had defensive ends and tight ends who have jumper's knee pain. And my theory on that is something that I feel pretty strongly about. And culturally speaking, in football, more than anything, the goal is to move weight with as much intent as possible from A to B, right? We're trying to move the weight fast. And like a squat is a squat. A squat is a squat. Unfortunately, like we talk about this all the time. Athletes, they're the best problem solvers, the best athletes are the best compensators, whatever. You load up a shit ton of weight on someone's back. The easiest, fastest way to adapt, to learn how to move that weight as quickly as possible, as fast as possible from A to B is to sit back into your hips, keep your weight into the heels. And most of these guys from high school on are coached to squat that way. There's not nearly enough direct quad loading. Like these high schools, collegiate programs, there aren't leg extensions in most of these weight rooms, right? Um, Most of their squats are not being done in Olympic lifting shoes or heel wedges. That is changing. I'm seeing more of that. But for the most part, you're ending up with this super hinge, quote unquote, hip dominant. And why? Because every fucking strength coach who has their CSCS, whose mentor went before them, said, "Power comes from your hips. You got to load the hips because that's where the power comes from." And they're not wrong. But if you develop these powerful, robust hips and you never fucking directly train your quads, and then you go out onto the field and you try and stop, start, and change direction suddenly, you're gonna get jumper's knee, dude. Like that is what happens. And the crux of the problem, and you touched on this at the beginning of my rant here, is that when someone has jumper's knee, most of the time you can say, "How strong are your quads?" or "Show me a squat." I watch them squat, and maybe it looks good with the lightweight, but the second it starts getting anywhere near challenging, they're not fucking using their quads. They're not bending their knees. They're bending their hips. They're bending their hips. And even I'll say, okay, I see what's going on here. Let me get you on a hack squat. What's the first thing they do? They don't put their feet low and underneath their hips. They put their feet high and wide as possible so they can avoid bending their knees. And guys who can technically squat 600 pounds, not fucking kidding. Put them on a leg extension with 50 pounds. And by rep 12, they're fucking quivering, shaking. They're miserable, right? So what we have is like a systemic issue, particularly in football, where, and like, again, all of those things I kind of touched on are an undercurrent of misinformation that coaches have grown up with their entire time, where it's like dominant is bad. Everything good comes from the hips and glutes. And what happens is like you craft a program where the quads aren't really being prioritized in movements. And I'll finish with this. I don't even remember what the original question was. How you perform a movement matters. It matters. And what I found, I remember now, how long does it take for them? How's their quad strength and how long does it take? So here's the answer. Most guys I have for a full NFL offseason, best case scenario is I have them 10 weeks before they go to OTAs and 5 weeks after OTAs. That almost never happens. Guys like to go to Miami for a week or two. You know what I mean? And I don't blame them. Young millionaires, they're going to go, you know what I'm saying? But so what does that give me? Like 15 weeks? You can make a ton of progress, but almost always it's never enough to completely eliminate knee pain, like jumper's knee pain, because it's chronic and it's not something like the adaptations that occur at the tendon level. are just not the same. Like a guy will put on 8 pounds of muscle tissue in the time that they're with me, and we can hammer their quads, and their quads will be their jumper's knee pain will be significantly better than when they walked in, but it's almost never entirely gone. And enter in, some of the things and principles that I've learned from you and from David Gray, and I can give them things to do in their time away from me. And even at this point now, which is really cool, I have the opportunity to communicate with performance coaches at the teams that they're at and be like, hey, like here's the changes we've made, here's the things that have worked well for him, here are the things that he needs to keep doing, right? So in my own knee pain journey, like I had to get honest with myself. I was like, oh, I can squat 350 pounds, but it's a low bar back squat and I'm sitting my hips back, right? Like I had to make the switch, the transition to squatting more upright, more quad dominant. And like I was weak as a kitten and it sucked and it was kind of humiliating. But like that's what it took. And it took me being honest about that and consistently, progressively overloading that quote unquote quad dominant, but what I would actually call just an actual squat pattern for a long time. And, lots of loaded sissy squats and leg extensions and you know what I mean? So, yeah.
Yeah, I remember back kind of when we met. I was talking about the split squat, the iso lunge, the split squat, and saying how
hmm
I like that for my tendon. But you said it makes it worse. Is that still the case? Like, why do you think? Is it on the back leg it makes it worse?
No, I think at the time, like for me, it like there just wasn't enough load, and it was just enough to make me overly aware of how bad my tendon hurt. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if it was like actually like quote unquote making it worse. You know what I'm saying?
Okay,
But
yeah,
like, but but here's the other thing too. Like that at the time was like my Hail Mary, and like that was the thing. And so like what was happening is I wasn't getting stronger. I still wasn't loading my quads, so I was still getting weaker and my pain was just getting worse. So I think I made the leap to say, because I'm doing this, therefore I'm getting worse. But actually, it was all the other things I just listed. The body weight split squat lunge was just the collateral damage caught up because that was the thing that I just introduced. But it wasn't the problem. It wasn't the solution either. It was just the thing that was there while my pain was getting worse. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. Okay, so going back to that, it matters how you do something. I bring
Yeah.
up that's split squat because I remember you saying that, but yesterday I had a guy, a phone call with a guy who had actually he's tore his ACL 3 times now, and this time they took a quad tendon graft, and he's having a hard time activating his quad. So we talked for like 45 minutes, really to no conclusion of figuring out how, because he's tried everything. And I was like, maybe it's just a matter of time. You've only given it 2 months, and 2 months for a tendon is not that long, especially for a when they took a big chunk out of the tendon. 2 months is not that long.
Fuck.
Keep being patient.
Yeah.
But he does a split squat with that bad leg in the back, and you just see like the anterior tilt, and they're not loading that back leg. So when you get guys, because I know you're doing split squat variations, is it the same thing where you see like this back hip is just going into anterior tilt, and they don't want to load that rectus femoris on the back leg?
100%. In fact, I was David was with me, and we had an athlete who had jumper's knee pain, and we were doing those alternating lunge jumps, right? And you could see on that knee that had been impacted, like he didn't want to load and allow that back knee to sink in that leg because that's in that lengthened position, that quad even though it's like it's a split squat position, but like that quad is being lengthened in it's being eccentrically lengthened in an already lengthened position underneath the hip like that, and you could see him like seeking and trying to run away from that side, and like he wouldn't actually allow the knee to fully sink in, like he wasn't allowing, he didn't know he was doing it, but like he was avoiding actually loading that tissue at that length in that position. Whereas on the other side, like it looked totally fine, and like considering that that's what he had going on, it makes a ton of sense. Like, why would you know, like if you're not aware of that, that's of course that's what's going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay, back when you started, it was like avoid. Okay, that's a really bad problem to have when it's like avoid the quads, so like you're not doing any quads. But then the next step is probably appreciate like quads is probably number one for knee pain. Like you got to get the quads
Yeah.
back. But then it's like how do you progress back into max effort jumping? And I think for me, it actually took me many years of realizing like this has to be progressed. I can't just do a bunch of strength exercise like isometrics and lifting, and then okay, I'm pretty strong now and I've taken time off of jumping. Let me go and dunk again. It's like I'm gonna go dunk again. It's just gonna blow up right away. So I had to learn. It was not easy because there was nothing really available. Maybe Matt Watson kind of his tier system kind of paints this picture of how to progress things, and I probably don't know because I never have been involved in track and field to appreciate that stuff. It's like you just play basketball and either you play basketball or you don't play basketball. Either you dunk or you don't dunk. What was it like for you with like plyometric progressions? Like you know what I'm talking about? Like realizing you can actually jump in a way that's not 100%. What was that journey like for you?
Yes. Well, like you, like the goal was like get out of enough pain that I could go dunk. Because that was also the journey I was on, right? That was like the reason why the jumper's knee pain was like, because otherwise I wouldn't have given a shit. I'd be like, whatever, my knee's fucking hurt. But I was like playing basketball, and that's what I loved to do at that time. And I had this goal of increasing my vertical as much as I possibly could and be able to do more than just a classic yam. You know, I wanted to be able to windmill. I wanted to be able to throw it off the glass and put it down and do a 360 and um, I would go and it was like rolling the dice. I could go and I could jump and have a dunk session and maybe have just a little tenderness the next day, totally fine. Or or I could show up and on my fifth dunk attempt, I go and plant that second leg and ding, you know, you feel the strum. It's like strumming a bass chord on a bass guitar. It's like boom, it's like fuck, session over. You know what I mean? And like it's gonna be sore for a couple of days. And so I did that like haphazardly. And then what happened is I started doing more um at the time what I wouldn't have called this extensive plyos. And then more hops, bounds, skips for height, skips for distance. And what I kind of naturally uncovered was like, okay, like I started to gain awareness around like what it felt like to push those movements and what I could tolerate on that given day, and just being honest with myself. And like one of the key takeaways for me is like, okay, can I jump high? Can I jump far? Particularly in like these single leg hops or skips for height, skips for distance, and can I do it with rhythm and timing without a lot of pain? And the goal was like living in those spaces for a long time and only pushing it when my pain would tell me it was okay to do so. And like, trust me, like the way I operate is not like that. I am not that fucking guy. I am all or nothing. I'm either, like you said, I'm playing basketball or I'm not. I'm dunking or I'm not. But I got to that place out of pure necessity because what I was doing previously, it just wasn't working for me. Um, and so also too, like I became more aware of like what kinds of plyos and jumps were more likely to really piss a tendon off. So like, you know, doing like really high hurdle hops, you know, and for a period of time, not a great idea. Doing skips for height as high as I possibly could when my tendons are already cranky, not a great idea. You know what I mean? And whereas like, you know, slower jumps, I could do a depth jump, but a drop jump could be a problem, right? So like these where I have those like almost shallower knee angles where I'm trying to reverse and there's just more velocity and there's what I would assume to be a much more intense demand on the tendon to load eccentrically because the muscles aren't moving as much, the joint isn't moving as much. Um, those were typically the things that really pissed me off. So I had to live in that slower ground contact, a lot of 2 foot jumping, not a lot of single leg stuff. Like it took me a while to get to a place where I could single leg hop or single leg bound and add velocity without having issues.
Mhm. Where did you get this? I'm reminded. I had posted a reel on BJP on I think it was Barry Sanders and I think I talked about jumpers knee. but I must have did I think I called it change of directions knee or something. It was something like that. Where'd you get this idea of decelerators knee?
I forget who I feel like I've heard it from you. I heard it from someone. Um,
Because
I can't.
there was a study called jumper's knee or lander's knee, because the landing is, if you look at a force plate, the landing has this really sharp loading, like versus the jump can be like kind of smooth. It can be much more smooth than the landing. So it's like, well,
Yeah,
if the rate of loading is so high, it's going to the tendon. So is it more stressful to the tendon? But anyways, yeah. Where'd you hear it?
that's it. Well, I don't know. It might have been you, and maybe I just kind of bastardized it and called it decel. But like I've heard it from David too. I've heard him say that as well. I think I have. Um, but at any rate, the idea of it not being because here's the thing. Even that paper you talked about, I've never ever pissed off a jumper's knee from a landing from my dunk.
Yeah, I
Never.
don't think I have either, and I haven't heard that story either. I I know what you mean. Yeah, it just doesn't
It's
happen.
it's
I
it's
feel like the body kind of figures out the landing. You know, like
yes,
it figures it out in midair what you're gonna do with the landing. But maybe it's when you're doing the jump. I think it's that stop, that planting, the planting that
hundred
really gives
percent,
it. Yeah, but yeah,
hundred
exactly.
percent.
The landing. It's like the study on jumper's knee or lander's knee. It's like, well, then why aren't people blowing their tendons? They probably do. You like that. This is the thing I've seen is like I've given universal rules of like you can't rupture a tendon this way. You can't, and it's like the more time I've been around, I'm like you can actually rupture a tendon anyway, and you can rupture a tendon like not at the you can rupture a tendon anywhere. Like you can there was a really weird rupture. Someone told me in NBA. It was a guy. Oh, yeah, NBA player had like a super weird location of an Achilles rupture, and I was like, dude, I didn't even know that could happen. So like the more time around, I'm like, anything can happen. But no, now that you say that though, the landing, it's like I've never experienced a blow up from a land. I've only ever experienced it from like the jump or the approach.
Here's the thing with force plate data like that too, that's like misleading and doesn't tell the whole picture. Going back to what I said about how you do something matters. Like there's if two athletes move 405, they're doing a back squat, and you put them side by side. One of them does that low bar hips back strategy, and one of them has their heels elevated and goes straight up and down like an elevator. No one, the dumbest bodybuilder on the planet will tell you one of those things is loading one tissue more than the other. Full stop. With that study you're talking about, is there a higher peak forces on the landing than the takeoff per se? Sure, but you're not landing the way you took off. You know what I'm saying? You're usually landing like one foot then the other foot, and your entire body is folding and crumbling, and you're dissipating the force differently. So it's like comparing apples to oranges. You know what I mean?
And
Like,
I wouldn't even
yeah,
think
they're
on the I
they're
wouldn't even think
doing
on
the
the
same thing, but it's not the same thing.
exactly. Yes. Well, I thought you were going a different route with that. I thought you were going to say when they land on the force plate, like they will land with more hips than knees.
True.
And like that
I
is a
mean,
thing too. Yeah. Yeah. If your knees hurt, are you going to want to land straight with your torso upright and your knees forward? No.
no, you won't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
unless you're trying to blow up your tendon.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know if we've talked about this before, but back when I was just maybe before like Keith Barr, Joe Cook, all that stuff I had learned about. I did a podcast with Knees Over Toes guy, and I was kind of getting into his stuff for a little bit, and it was really cool. Initially was really cool, and then it got really successful, and they just made these wild claims that were like, I don't really like this anymore. What was your? Did you have any? Did you have any journey like trying to experiment with these things, or like, do you have athletes come to you like talking about this type of stuff? They want to train this way. Yeah. What did you
For
have?
sure. So like the Poliquin step up, the split squat movement where you're like really like throwing you're arching your low back and slamming your knee way past your toe. The reverse sled drags. I've experimented with all of these things prior to it being like an ATG, it being like these foundational movements to the ATG system, because there was a point in time where I was willing to try fucking anything, to get out of knee pain. And it's like, of course, the pendulum swings. So like on one end, when I was like, oh, I need to load my quads, and I started feeling them better. So I thought, what I need to do is hyper jam my knees past my toes. I need to get as much knee flexion as humanly fucking possible on everything all the time. Because again, I'm all or nothing, and that's just how my monkey brain works, right? However, for example, like the ATG split squat or whatever, while you're getting a lot of range of motion and flexion at the knee, and it looks, but if you really look at it side by side, if you do that amount of knee, just look at the joint and the way the quad is interacting with the knee joint. Is that any more closed of an angle than a really deep hack squat? No. Your knee can only bend so much. But then now here's the other problem. How much can you actually load up that movement relative to something like a head squat or a leg press or a leg extension, right? And because of the nature of that movement, you're starting basically in your heel, and your center of mass is here, and then the knee drops forward and your center of mass shifts. So you're only really loading that tissue at the most deepest end range of that position, and then you're back out. And so it does a poor job of loading. The strength curve is dog shit. And there are other ways to get that same amount of knee bend reliably, consistently with more balance. Dog shit movement. The Poliquin step up. Exact same principle. A lot of tendon load, not a lot of muscular load. Very short range of motion, incredibly hard to load up. Is there any stability for you to really send it and drive intent? Absolutely fucking not. Get it out of here. Reverse sled drags. Here's the redeeming one. If you're someone whose your knee pain is bad, you know what I mean? And you're just looking for an option, a very low, it's a, it's a wonderful rehab exercise. It can do a great job of just getting blood into the quads and being this really sort of like basically essentially dipping your toe into the water to be able to like get some relief from knee pain and just get blood going and just like, get movement into the joint. However, long term, like there's an expiration date on that movement and its ability to move the needle, particularly if the number one thing that's going to likely improve your jumper's knee pain is quad strength. At a certain point, you can only reverse your sled drag so much effectively and it be a useful exercise. And again, small range of motion. You can load it up, sure, but like you're not getting much actual knee flexion. Like when it comes to building a robust, strong quad, like you need to be getting to at least parallel. Like there needs to be a certain amount of knee flexion occurring. Here's the other thing: there's no eccentric loading. There's no eccentric loading of the portion, which, by the way, when you're experiencing jumper's knee, is the most important quality to train, right? Because it's not the eccentric portion of the movement that's going to cause you trouble. We beat this to death already, where it's like it's decelerator's knee. So that eccentric loading portion of the movement is incredibly important. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like I just did a really good job of putting those three exercises in the blender. I'm very proud of me. I hope anyone listening to this who loves those exercises and you've had great, wonderful experiences with them, fantastic. Don't at me. Okay? Just listen to what I'm saying and use your logic brain when it comes to and look, listen, there's no magical exercise. That's the other thing. That's the thing really that about the whole ATG system that I've got big beef with. None of those. There is no exercise. I wish there was a magic exercise. I wish there was, but there just isn't. And like, if you're someone who's weak as shit and you're not an athlete and you don't, you know what I mean? And like those things are enough for you to be fit and work out and get out of knee pain, great. But when you're talking about real athleticism, people who are moving and changing directions, who are big, fast, and strong, those things are a drop in the ocean. That if you've got kitten knees and you need kitten solutions, cool.
Yeah. I've never thought of that. The backward sled. I've always not enjoyed it. I mean, I did it way back in the day. Like DeFranco probably had it in his West Side program,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
it was just annoying. I could never really feel it in my quads. And then you're always concerned with what am I going to run into? And you run out of space. And but I never thought of the deceleration aspect of like, um, which yeah. And then people might question, well, in an isometric, you're not getting, but it's like, well, in an isometric, yes, you are because you're holding and the tendon is getting this stress relaxation and these things are happening with the tendon, so it is getting some elongation. But yeah, if you're just doing the quads, you're trying to get the quads back, and you're just doing a concentric only, like that's not. What are you doing? Like I guess you can activate the quads, you can feel a pump, but like you want to develop some quad strength, and that's probably all it's good for is like feeling the quads, getting a pump in the quads. But like you have to actually start doing some squat patterns or some leg extension patterns.
But that's the pattern people get caught in, Jake, where it's like you do just enough to feel better. And like, trust me, you get a pump in your quads, it doesn't matter what you do. Pick any exercise. Get a fucking nasty pump in your quads. Your knees are gonna feel better. Period. They're gonna feel better right then and there, right? But that window is the same trap I fell into for many, many years, and a lot of athletes fall into, where they do just enough to feel better. And so the leap you make in your brain is like, oh, it feels better, therefore it's working, therefore this is a good exercise. But the problem becomes is because you're never actually doing anything to progressively strengthen that joint, that tissue over a long period of time, you're like a fucking buoy in the middle of a storm in an ocean. And like sometimes the storm comes down and you're like, oh, okay, things are gonna get better. Fucking wrong, because inevitably it's going to flare up again. And that's just, I wish that wasn't the case. I wish that just like doing just enough to feel better, stretching, foam rolling, getting a nice pump in the quads was enough to effectively eliminate jumper's knee pain long term. It's just not. And really, my experience has been is it doesn't matter what tendon it is. If you have gotten at no matter if it's Achilles, in your shoulder, if it's quad tendon, patellar tendon, once a certain line is crossed and it's gotten to a place of irritation, or there's been some damage, it's been compromised. Once that line is crossed, just doing enough to feel better is not going to likely be enough to get better. I wish that wasn't the case.
Mhm. Um, I wanted to talk on other tendons. I had another one on the patellar though. I was going to ask it earlier. No, this is what it was. You said there's no magical exercises, and I was like, if there was one, I would say leg extension. And I initially probably said that like the first 2 3 years, but since then, and it's always the people that do phone consults. It's like not all of them, but I've probably had 50, maybe 100 through DMs too. That like leg extension is just awful for their tendon. Like just blows them up, makes it way worse. They're trying to change the angle, like go to more extension or maybe even more flexion, trying to lighten the
Hmm.
load, and it's like they just cannot figure it out. Usually I do get them to figure it out by going to a lighter weight, longer time, or just more
Yes.
extended. But sometimes it just really doesn't agree with them. Have you seen this with the NFL guys, or I guess anyone you've seen? Because we speak so highly of the leg extension, but have you had people where like it just doesn't work for them?
Yeah, it's just not agreeable. I have the other exercise that I actually think is equally, if not more impactful, um, if it's done regularly, consistently, and close enough to failure. Okay, those are the criteria. The sissy squat. Okay, but here's the thing: people will butcher a sissy squat and they'll get their knees to the floor. But okay, so check this out. So let's just say this is the knee. Okay, so this is the femur and this is the calf. What'll happen is people will shift themselves forward, but they'll never actually close that angle between the femur and the tibia. Okay. So they're thrusting themselves forward at this angle, but there's nothing actually being loaded through flexion eccentrically in that movement. When people do it correctly, they fold the knee like a lawn chair and their chest is essentially facing the roof. We're in the bottom of that movement. Okay? That's how it's done correctly. And then what happens is you get a fucking insane amount of eccentric loading at both the hip and knee joint. Okay, it's the only thing I'm aware of, apart from doing like a leg extension where you're able to completely lay down, and this, for whatever reason, the pad is able to go up all the way up underneath your ass on the machine. There's nothing that's going to be able to load your rec fem in that way at the hip and knee at the same time. The goal here is to control the eccentric as long as possible. It should be miserable, but you need to move slowly, particularly if that tendon's pissed off, because remember, it's decelerator's knee. And if you're going to thrust yourself into that position where that tissue is that eccentrically overloaded, you don't want to do it with speed. Not initially. Bad idea. Okay. You close off that hamstring and calf angle, that you get into much knee flexion as possible. And then on the way back up, that's where you use the assistance. And you probably will. I'm at a place where I don't need to anymore. My knees also don't hurt anymore. I mean, I don't know. But and then here's what people will also do when they come back up, they'll try and sit their hips back. So they'll try and take tension off of the quads by getting into hip flexion. So as you come back up, you want to make sure your hips stay extended and push all the way back up through the full range of motion. Here's the deal, and this is the last thing I touched on before, okay? You have to do it right. You have to do it through full range of motion, and you have to push it close to failure. If you're not within 2 RIR, you're not going to get what you need to get out of that exercise. And like for most people doing that the first time, like they'll do 4 reps, Jake. And that's like 1 RIR. They're fucking smoked. But there's something really magical, air quotes magical, that happens if you can get people to load rec fem through the hip, through an extended hip, and through a fully flexed knee in that position. That's like fucking money. So yeah, that would be my magical exercise. And then like, if people get good at it, you can throw a weight vest on somebody. You can get them to just hold a dumbbell on the eccentric portion only, set that motherfucker down right in front of their lap, and then pull themselves back up. So there's ways to really load that sucker up. But honestly, like even just body weight, if you're getting to the point where you're doing 10 reps and you're like 1 to 2 reps away from failure, your fucking quad pump, but you're gonna be blown up. It's great. Yeah.
Okay, the other exercise I think I'm thinking of with the rec fem, the hip and the knee, reverse Nordic. Have you tried reverse Nordic? You haven't.
I hate them. So here's the problem. It's like it's funny. It's like it's the same thing. What are you talking about? But what I find is like in that reverse Nordic, because you're already starting with like this parallel tibia on the floor, and your tibia is on the floor, right? There just isn't enough loading to me that's happening where you're able, because like before when you're starting in the sissy squat, as your knee begins to bend and your hips to begin to move back, that's a lot of time under tension that you get to have that like you otherwise probably don't get with the Nordic, with the wait, what's the variation, the name you said? I'm sorry, where
Reverse
you're
Nordic. Reverse Nordic.
the reverse Nordic, right? Um and then also too, like you almost always, just because of the nature of the exercise, like you have to start off with a band and like you can't get all the way back. But the cool thing about doing a sissy squat relative to that is like because you can use your body weight to force you into that more knee bent position, and you have your hands to support you to allow for that to happen, you can kind of auto regulate what you need. So you have an opportunity to load through a more full range of motion consistently, rep after rep. Whereas, like, with the assisted Nordic for me, it's like kind of awkward and like you probably need a band and like that's not always consistent and it just feels a little bit more tedious. And frankly, like, it's not as hard. It's just not as hard. And like I feel like that sissy spot, like it needs to be hard. Like it needs to be like, oh my fucking god, I hate this a little bit. When you're trying to load the quad like that. Yeah, but it's probably. I mean, I'm sure some people do it and they love it and it's probably fine. But that's just been my experience.
Have you, so like a progression? You kind of said the just adding weight. I think I've heard people say
Mhm.
single leg. Is that a thing you've seen or you've tried?
Holy fuck! I've never tried that. Honestly, I've never even seen that. Um, the yeah,
Maybe I'm
I've
making it up
never.
then. I thought I heard it.
I mean, honestly, that would be so impressive to me. And like anyone, I mean, I don't know. The more I think about it, like depending on how much support you're giving yourself, you could probably start doing single leg right away. But like, I haven't found it necessary. And here's the other thing: I'm a big fucking dude. Like, I'm 235. I'm 6'3". I've got a lot of body weight. Like moving into that, and like doing 10 reps at that body weight is like it's a lot of load, you know. Um, so yeah, I don't have enough experience. I have zero experience doing it single leg, so I can't say. But I would imagine if you can do several reps single leg sissy squat like that, you probably don't have much knee pain. I mean, that's incredible.
Okay, I always, I guess, when I talk the patellar tendon, I'm like quads is number one, and I'm like, something like the leg extension or a squat pattern, something where like you're just extending the knees basically is good. But then I'm like, let's do something to also address like rec fem with like you could do a sissy squat or like a split squat or something like that. And I'm like, that's pretty
Hmm.
thorough quad strength development. But then like talking about other areas, and I think it was David had that foam roller bridge, you know, the calf and the calf hamstring connection thing. And I've given that to a number of people, and like some of them, it's like magically relieves the front of their knee. I think it's more patellofemoral when that's the case. But that's kind of my like number two when I'm talking about just static or strength exercises is like let's get the quads going with something, but then like let's address the calf hamstring thing. Yeah, what if I see you use it all the time? Yeah, what have you found with it?
I love it. So in the Jumpers Knee program I made, like I said, like I was pulling things from you and David, and then stuff I kind of figured out on my own. Like, before you even start the session, you're doing some sissy squats to get your quads loaded up through full range of motion, and you're doing a foam roller bridge. And because I've found for myself personally, and then when I started using it with athletes, I was able to confirm that, where it's like some people respond better to one than the other. Um, but most people, if you have jumper's knee, both of those things can be beneficial. So like with the foam roller bridge, what I'll notice, and it's like you can set your clock to it. If someone has jumper's knee or they've had a legitimate knee injury, an ACL, whatever, LCL, MCL, if they've had a knee injury on whatever leg it is, and you get them on that foam roller bridge and they actually, because people will do it and they won't let their calf show up to the party. They'll drop their heel. You have to be actively pushing in to the foam roller with your forefoot, pushing hard into the calf. They'll cramp up immediately. And the other side, albeit fucking miserable for them, they'll be able to hang in there 20, 25 seconds before they start to get so fatigued that they want to cramp. But like on the side that has jumper's knee or there's been an insult, an injury, they'll cramp up quickly. I'm not going to pretend like I understand why that's happening. I have theories, you know. I think that the way that your muscles co-contract around a knee are probably impacted because of the way you're utilizing the knee and whatever compensation you have adapted to be able to function without actually loading the knee, you know. And like you can see that when you watch someone do a single leg jump off of a box and then land. If they have jumper's knee or if they've had an ACL, you'll see them be able to, like, when they jump, they'll have a certain knee angle and it usually matches their torso angle. And then when they land, that knee or that shin angle and torso angle will usually match up. On the side that's been injured, when they land, you'll see that shin angle is really high, and then their torso angle has to pitch forward even more because they have to load back into the hip because they're refusing to load that knee. Something about that process impacts the ability for the gastroc, hamstring, and quad to co-contract and stabilize that knee. And it could be a chicken or the egg thing. Maybe that was the issue to begin with, and that's what played a role. Because the way I've kind of made sense of this in my mind, and it could be totally fucking wrong, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. But it appears to me, particularly with the knee, like your quad, your hamstring, your calf, they work in dynamic movement as stabilizers for the knee joint, quite literally stabilizing the knee so that it does not move, right? There's very little knee bend happening when it's time to stop, time to change direction. There is that moment in time where the knee isn't moving. It's not supposed to. And that affords your tendons the opportunity to elongate underneath that eccentric loading, right? And that's where the propulsion eventually comes from. The change in direction, stopping the. And something about not bending the knee or having knee pain throws the timing of that off because you're not doing it. You're utilizing other strategies. And there's something that happens when you reintroduce a movement like a foam roller bridge where you are putting your joint, your knee, in a position where those co-contractions have to occur. Your body's, there's no other options. It's like the ultimate constraint-led approach when it comes to trying to get muscles to work together to stabilize that joint. Um, and then here's the other thing. Everything I'm pontificating on about why it happens, why it doesn't happen. Here's the kicker. None of it fucking matters because it works. It works. It makes a difference. It makes a difference. And whether and then what you'll notice is like if people are consistent with it, they'll stop cramping on that side. They'll report that their knee feels better. You'll notice that they have a tendency to actually start bending that knee more in movement, assuming that they are also doing things in the gym that encourage them to move through flexion and build, like quad strength. So I think it's the ultimate one-two punch, really. Getting isometrics and getting stronger calf muscles, hamstring muscles showing up to the party in combination with that quad and getting them all to work together to stabilize the knee. Yeah, knee flexion and knee stabilization.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be magic. It can be magic for a lot of people. It's such a weird exercise to think
It's
of.
so weird.
Yeah, yeah,
It sucks so bad, by the way, too. I'm sure. I would assume the diehards that listen to your podcast have probably heard about this exercise, seen it, or done it. But man, if you haven't done it, do it. Just do it. Particularly if you're dealing with jumper's knee pain right now, or you've had a previous injury, do it on that leg, then do it on the other leg. Do it. Fuck
yeah.
around and find out,
That
and then report back to me. Re-listen to this part of the podcast.
this was
Yeah.
well, this was one thing my colleague said with the guy with the quad tendon graft was it sounded like he's been doing everything, and I was like foam roller bridge, and he's like I've never heard of it, and I'm like all right, well start doing it every day. And I have two YouTube videos. One of them is with you. The second part's with you. I did a little interview with you, explaining it, but yeah, I just think those are two things. Like you got to get the quads back, and then we got to do something to get that calf and the hamstring, so like you get some stabilization of the knee. Or I even think it's when your foot hits the ground, like you're getting the calf and the hamstring can maybe work now because you've put it in an exercise where like they had to work together. I don't know exactly what's happening. It just has this. It can have this immediate effect where your knee is not feeling good and you do it and then you go back to the thing you were doing and it's like oh I feel so much better. So I think it is affecting something when you're going back to the actual movement. Um, so I wanted to say you talk about these NFL guys you see or any of these athletes and
Mhm.
the best way to rehab a patellar tendon is like off season where you don't need to. If you're a basketball player, you can get off the court. Football, you can get out of practices, you can get out of skill workouts, and we can stop doing like the really hard decelerations or the jumps. Um,
Mhm.
and often yeah, people can't do that. So when you're talking about rehabbing these people and like you're addressing the quad strength, you're addressing like calf hamstring, you're doing knee flexion, you're trying to look at like their plyo movement and see that they can actually bend the knee on the injured side. Uh,
Yep.
how are you doing all this if they are going and aggravating their knee from the sport?
So you have to have an honest conversation. We probably could have talked about this at the beginning, but like there's this association that like you shouldn't be in pain. And like maybe you could make the argument that like, well, you couldn't, had things been done differently, potentially maybe you wouldn't have been, but here we are. And the issue I run into is that even in the off season, athletes want to do their sport. And so I'll tell them, I'm like, look, man, here's the deal. Like, this is going to take a long time to recover from. You're going to have peaks and valleys. The goal that we're going for is that the trend over any given period of time is that it's always kind of getting better. Your ability to improve by this is going to be directly correlated almost always to how much you can eliminate the thing that makes it hurt the most. Okay? So like if you're a jumper, dude, and every time you jump, it's like starting back over at square one, guess what? You gotta stop dunking for a while. You gotta stop. You have to stop. If you want it to get all the way better. And even then, like, as I say that, like my experience has been, it's like, even today, like I have no jumper's knee pain, but I'm telling you, if I go have a dunk session out of nowhere and I just dunk for 2 hours, best believe the next day my patellar tendons are going to be sore. You know what I'm saying? So like, having that conversation where it's like, look, like there's going to be a direct correlation to how much skill work you're doing with your position coach here on the field immediately after our leg days, and how quickly you're going to be able to get and see marketable improvements in this patellar knee pain. So like, and that's a decision for them to make. But I do present that information, and I also say it in a way, it's like, look, good news, we've got some solutions here. Bad news, you're kind of fucked because it's going to require you doing less of the thing that pays the bills. You know, some guys, and now here's the thing with football players, culturally speaking, the pain's not a problem. Fuck it. You know, they hate it, they don't want it, but culturally in football, unless there's meat hanging off the bone or you have dislocated a joint, you're fucking playing. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's a little bit different, you know, and some guys care more than others, and some guys are more sensitive than others, but generally speaking, it's like, oh, it's jumper's knee? You mean it's not going to cause something to rupture? Okay, put me in. I'm playing, you know, and then we'll deal with the collateral after the fact. Whereas, like, culturally speaking, like volleyball and like basketball, it's like a little more, you know, they're a little more sensitive. They just are, you know, they're not tackling each other at full speed, you know, and getting dog cursed. So yeah, having that conversation, setting the expectations, and then also like David, I watched him. I had him work with two of my players here while he was in town, because like there's things that I'm doing, but like these are the things that I've got the guy that I took these ideas from in town. You're gonna see that guy, you know. And like David was able to like write a prescription for them. He's like, oh, here's the things they're doing. All these things are great. Like, let's just add in an extra day, and you're going to do X, Y, and Z. And you're going to do those every other day, no matter what, regardless of whether you're with Tim or not. I was like, amazing, thank you. You know, so it's gonna take a long time. You're gonna have to be consistent, and you're gonna have to be aware that like you're gonna have good days and bad days. But if you keep doing these things, it will continue to get better. But it's not ever gonna completely go away until you completely remove the thing that's causing it. Sorry, you know. And if you set that expectation, then like one, you've been honest. Two, you're not putting yourself in like this weird position where it's like they're coming to you, and every time it gets worse or better, it's like, what do I do, Tim? You said it would get better. It's like, motherfucker, like I'm not. I'm not Jesus. I can't touch your fucking knee and make it like no one can. If anyone says they can, they're lying, you know? I'm looking at you, ATG. So like, you know what I mean? Like that's just not reality. And but yeah, like that's typically what the conversation looks like.
These were, I'm curious what these were guys with patellar tendon.
Yeah. I
So
have a guy, he plays for the Cardinals. He ran 4.39 at his combine. He's 230 pounds. So strong. I mean, just unbelievably strong. But you know, and like I have him on a hack squat, I have him on leg extension, and like his quads relative to his hips and everything else, like they're just weak. And I'm like trying to coach him through the concept of delaying the extension on these movements. And it was actually really nice having David come to the town, because David was able to take him and just like, all right, let's take him off the weights for a minute and let's just do like a body weight assessment. See, and 8 reps of David just like holding his hand in front of his knee and not allowing him to sit back into his hips, and actually force him to use his knee and stay in that mid range and get flexion and extension through the knee joint and nowhere really else. 8 reps, split squat stance. He was fucking cooked, leg quivering and shaking. You know what I mean? And that was actually really illuminating for me, because it was like, damn, like I've had him um, on hack squat, on leg extension, doing all these things. but like it seems like he's still finding a way to avoid to load that quad. And then after that intervention with David, like I was like, that's how it should all feel, man. That's what I've been trying to show you. And it was like the light bulb went off. And so moving forward, what I'm going to do, because I've done this in the past, I just got away from it. You know how you just get away from things for no reason? And then someone does it, you're like, why the fuck did I ever stop doing that? So that's what I would do. I would get them in that strip squat. You remember these? The strip squat. In fact, I was so obsessed with those for a while. Remember when we would go to Big Tex, I would do a strip squat on the Super Cat and load it up. Anyway, so I'm like, oh my God, I just have to start doing this again where I have them do that shrimp squat first, body weight, where they have to load the knee, they have to load the quad. They get absolutely roasted just doing body weight. And that foot pressure, the way the knee bends, the way the knee shouldn't move early into extension, right? Because all that means is like, the idea of delayed knee extension, at least in the squat, is the same thing we've been talking about this whole time where people they don't want to load their quads, they want to sit back into their hips, and like a way of thinking about it is like what people have commonly referred to as like a quote unquote stripper squat, right, where like they shoot their knees open up first, then the hips rise, and then it turns into like this weird good morning thing. But getting athletes, and that's what David did. He got him body weight, smoked his quad like that. And then the next day when we did a leg day, I had him doing single leg doing Bulgarians. I was like, and I saw him and he was sure enough, he was anteriorly tilted. He was opening up the knee first and then extending his hip. I was like, no, no, no. You have to do it just like we showed you yesterday. And I held my hand there and he did 8 reps and his fucking quad was ruined, right? Wrecked. It was a completely different exercise. So yeah, anyway, I'm rambling. I forgot what even you said.
Oh, it was what were the extra things he had him add in.
Okay, so and then he gave him this wall sit, but single leg, and then like, okay, so like here's the wall, here's his upper body, here's his femurs, here's his legs. So you start a little past 90 degrees. So there's not that much knee flexion. The knee is still at like an open joint angle. Okay. Call it 120 degrees. And pick up the other leg. So now it's just single leg body weight, and then push on the floor so that he's pressing his hips and back into the wall. So there's a contraction happening at in the quads and at the knee, and hold that for 5 seconds, then rest for 5 seconds. Push for 5 seconds, rest for 5 seconds. So like turning it off and on and just getting used to the feel of what it means to actually activate your quad in that position. And then to make it harder, he did it like in 4 steps. He had him move the foot to like 90 degrees, which made it harder. Then a little past 90 degrees, call it 80 degrees. And then where it was like 70 degrees, like there's a lot of knee flexion, and have him push, and it was just nasty. He was getting cooked there. And so the split squats, and then I think it was a leg extension. And it was like just like, hey, I want you to do these 3 movements. Start with the isos, then the split squats, finish with the leg extension. And you're gonna do 2 sets of each. And it's gonna be on the days that you don't do legs, where the tendon is feeling a little beat up. So just getting another opportunity. And it's funny because I haven't had jumper's knee pain so long for myself. In that program I initially wrote, frequency was really important. I forgot this. So I would do legs 3 times a week. I was training quads 3 times a week. And that was the thing, because I noticed like there was like this delicate balance between having frequency and intensity. And because what would happen is like if I'm not getting enough frequency in training the quads, then like I'm like essentially getting detrained. And like the more opportunities I got to actually load the tendon and load the quad, the better it was, at least from an analgesic perspective. So David essentially was like, I'm giving you an extra leg day. It's something you can do pretty much anywhere, and you're going to do it on the days where you don't feel that sore, that you're not also doing leg days with 10. And then honestly, I think the lowest hanging fruit was like David was actually able to get the light switch on for him regarding like how it should feel regardless of what quad exercise you're doing. Like there's a level of intensity and suck that you should feel in your quad regardless of the movement. And if you're not doing that, if you're not feeling that, you're doing it wrong. This is something bodybuilding gets right all the time, that sports performance still shits the bed on all the time. In fact, I'm going to make a post about this. I've been meaning to. It's come up. So bodybuilders inherently understand how you perform a movement impacts the tissue you're trying to train. And it's like you say that, it's like, no shit. But in the sports performance world, we don't really like at the highest levels. It's like we don't really think about that. It's just like you're deadlifting it, pick it up off the floor, stand it up. Period. Successful lift, great job. That was a lot of weight. You moved it fast. You made the thing go ding. Great. You know, same thing for the squat pattern. I ranted about this earlier at the beginning of the pod, where it's just like, oh, you moved a fuck ton of weight real fast. The boys were hype. You made the gym aware go ding. Perfect. You know, it's like not perfect. Like you trained the ability to move weight fast from A to B, but what were you training to do that, to accomplish that? Um, yeah. So grateful David came in town. It like reminded me of some stuff like I'd kind of gotten away from, and I was like, shit, I could have been more helpful for him these first couple of weeks. But I was kind of resting on my laurels for the things that work for most athletes 90% of the time. And having him there, it was like, fuck, I've gotten lazy with that 10%, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway.
The frequency thing what you were getting at was like you think you were doing 3 days a week, but like you're thinking more
Hmm.
in those cases of like I guess bad jumpers needs like more frequencies needed.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Um.
yeah,
Okay. We're like over an hour already, but I'm just gonna title this Patellar tendons with Tim Riley instead of tendons because we were gonna talk other tendons because I know you've had this Achilles issue and this rotator cuff.
yep,
So
yep.
just if you can for like I don't know, just run through these real quick. What's been going on? How did the
So
Achilles come up? How did
the
yeah.
the Achilles came up because I'm listen. I've been on this speed journey. My goal's been to hit 22 miles an hour over a 10 meter distance, right? I'm so close. I got to 21.7, and then I started really ramping up my sprint volume. Now, by the way, this is my first time being in spikes, being on the track. I spent my whole last year kind of brand new to this world. I didn't do track and field. I trained some track and field athletes, but not that many. And so, anyway, I'm doing every single sprint rep in spikes, every single one. And like I remember talking to like Trey Hardy, who's a silver medalist, and like Matt Clark, strength conditioning coach for K State track and field. That I did that, and I was like, man, my fucking Achilles is pissed. And they're like, how many reps are you running in spikes? I'm like, all of them. They're like, you're an idiot, So I'm doing my tempo runs in spikes, I'm doing everything in spikes. I'm a big guy, so I pissed off my Achilles tendon, first time ever, right? And when it initially happened, I was being kind of laissez-faire about it because I would just go and slam some heavy calf raises after, and the next day I'd wake up and it'd be fine. But then one day I did that and it was not fine. I was like tender getting out of bed, and I was like, oh no, I've fucking done it. Because I know how bad and how difficult it is to come back from an Achilles tendon. And it's more insertional, so it's closer to the heel. So like, you know, and I found out that like actually slamming it into deep ranges of motion was like the opposite thing you want to do. I figured that out real quick. And so what I started adopting was like some overcoming and yielding isometrics. And then I had to get out of the spikes. I had to get back into running shoes, and I had to start progressing my plyos again, dude. So like the good news is like my experience with the jumper's knee really prepared me to be able to be commonsensical about this. I'm also 30, I'll be 35 next month. I don't want to rupture my Achilles. Fuck that. I've jokingly, but not jokingly, said for a long time that if I rupture my Achilles or shred an ACL, I'm going to stop training like a quote unquote athlete, and it's going to be the beginning of my villain arc. I'm going to change my Instagram handle from Tim Riley Training to Trend Riley Training. I'm going to get on gear, and I'm just going to power build. You know what I mean? I'm just going to become a mutant. But yeah, like the idea of tearing Achilles terrifies me because I love to sprint and jump and do all that stuff. So I took it really seriously. I'm finally at a place now where it's like I'm good. I'm ready to get hurt again. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna put the spikes back on. I'm only gonna put them on for my final 2 reps that are supposed to be my fastest runs. I'm not gonna do my tempos in them. You know what I mean? And I'm really gonna have to. But now and then the one that I cannot, that has not helped, that just won't get better, is this. I have a subscap partial tear, and it's been a problem for a couple of years now. And it took me finally getting an MRI. I was like, God, it feels like a tendon. Like some days it's fine. Other days it hurts so fucking bad. I'll make a sudden movement and I get a sharp pain just like jumper's knee. I was like, but that doesn't make sense. You know? And then I got an MRI and I was like, yeah, your subscap's partially torn and you have chronic tendonitis in that tendon. I was like, tight. Awesome. Explains everything. So, basically like anything I did hurt. And so I haven't done a proper upper body workout in many months. I've been working with this PT. We're, you know, slowly getting through it. It is improving. But I have no answers for you there when it comes to the shoulder. I'm still going through that process and I haven't really been able to find anything that actually works yet.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a partial
yeah, the
tear.
shoulder is
It's
tough.
it's a tear of the tendon.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fucking nightmare, dude. And I went, I was like,
Well,
let me go see a surgeon.
I don't know if you. I did a recording with shoulder physio Jared Powell, and he's like
Okay.
the rotator cuff guy. So like if you ever need to talk to someone, I would talk to him because that's how they go. Is they tear. They get partial tears. It's like the analogy he uses is a sheet, but I've heard it as a sock too. That the rotator cuff, the way everything is built, they just get holes in them, and the holes don't actually like heal themselves. Like Keith Barr talks about the hole in a patellar tendon healing itself, or the Achilles healing itself. The holes in the rotator cuffs don't really go through that process. They just kind of stay there, and then they can actually get a little bigger over time. But yeah, people can just because you don't really the surgeries are not really good to like try to
Yeah.
fill those in or like replace them with something else right now at least. So yeah, I think it's just conservative rehab and trying to figure out what is the Goldilocks zone of loading and what's the best loading thing to do. But yeah, the whole like partial tear in the thing is really scary. But then if you accept that like 90 some percent of people by the age of like 50 or 60 are gonna have tears, and how many of them have pain? Not many have pain. So it's like it's just like it's just like tendinopathy of an Achilles or a patellar in an athlete. You're gonna have it there. You're gonna have tendinosis. I mean, you're gonna have tendinosis. You
Huh.
might or you might not have pain. But yeah, the tear thing is scary to hear. But
It
it's
sucks.
normal. But it's normal in a rotator cuff tendon.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I probably got them all over my rotator cuff tendons, and
Yeah. It's just for
so
it, but this one's painful. That's
yeah,
the thing.
exactly.
This,
That's the
it's like,
thing. Yeah,
and to the point where it's like, it's impacting the way my tissues are showing up. Like this PT I started working with, I was like, I got to the point, Jake, I couldn't even raise my arm overhead. This is the most I've been able to raise my arm overhead in over a year. I've been stuck here, bro. So bad. And like no benching, push-ups are off the table, like no pressing at all. And like bad. And I'm like doing all this soft tissue work, which is fucking miserable. But I had my PT show me like a diagram. He like drew a line down the middle of my body. My trap on this side was so like protective of this shoulder. This collarbone was pointing 45 degrees. Not kidding, 45 degrees up, and this collarbone was completely flat. I was basically like this all the time. I look like fucking Quasimodo. I'm like, how do people when they meet me not go like, "Hey, are you like deformed?" Like what? Like when I saw it, it was jarring. I was like, "Holy shit! I've been walking around like this for 2 years." Anyway, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, how long you've been dealing with it? 2 years?
It's been 3 years now, and like it's been gradually getting worse, and now it's finally starting to improve some. Like I did stem cells, I put $4,000 worth of stem cells in this thing, nothing. And then everyone I talk to are like, "Well, you have to do it a few times." I'm like, a few times? Are you? And then like it might not work. I'm not putting 12 grand in this shoulder for it not to work, dude. Fuck you. Hell no, I'm not doing that. You know? So
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. All right. Let's tell everyone where to find you.
Yeah, my name's Tim Riley. You can follow me at Tim Riley Training. Or, I don't know, depending on how this podcast went for you, unfollow me if you hate me. At Coach 'em Up Podcast. is probably the most exciting thing I got going on. We have wonderful guests like Jake on a regular basis and people a lot fucking smarter than me. Coach 'em Up conference is happening in June. The tickets are already sold out, so by the time you hear this, you're out of luck. But I hope to see you next year. And you know, if anyone makes it this far, blow up Jake's DMs about coming back on my show because we'd love to have him. Also, make a move to Austin. That's it.
You're making everyone. You're telling everyone to move to Austin.
I'm gonna try and be like the Joe Rogan of the strength and conditioning community. He's gotten every comedian on planet Earth to move to Austin, Texas. I'm gonna try and get all the coaches to move to fucking Austin, Texas, dude. That's my goal. I want you. I want Rattel. I want Yoakum. I want David. I'm getting David Gray to move here. Mark my words. David Gray is moving to Austin, Texas. Y'all heard it here first. Yeah, it's happening.
All right. All right, man. We'll talk later. Thanks for coming on.